After a nice breakfast, it was time to mount up and assemble at the meeting point, Kings Hill. Today we'd be doing a loop of just over 100 miles, with a mix of pavement and forest road. We'd be stopping for lunch at a place called the Blue Nugget in Sapphire Village. With a name like Sapphire Village, in my head I'd conjured up a much more ritzy image of the place than what it would turn out to be. On the short ride south to Kings Hill, one of us would have a little more excitement than we wanted.
Wow, I didn't have the camera rolling, but short ways back, a deer came racing across the road in a place that I never would have expected to see a deer cross the road. Big high bank on the left, and a big drop off down to the creek. And that doe just went screaming across the road. Looked like it ran just in front of David.
I would find out later that the deer had run up from the creek, spotted the oncoming motorcycles, and darted back. The day could have been cut short, but fortunately this time there was no collision. We arrived at the appointed meetup location and waited for the rest of the group. With riders gathered in their respective groups, Dan, Dave, John, and I set off on Forest Road 487. This was really the first time I'd done any off-pavement with the new 1290R.
Okay, now we get to see what the 1290 is made of.
It didn't take long to appreciate the off-road capabilities of the R. It put a grin on my face. The bike reminded me of the 950 Super Enduro KTM, which I'd sold years ago, only with way more power and better suspension. We'd stop along the way to grab a photo or two, but my cameras truly didn't capture the beauty of the landscape. The Canadian wildfire smoke would also cast a dull haze over the countryside.
Definitely must have been a fire on the hillside, though. A lot of destruction.
In some places, the roads were a bit narrow, but we really hadn't encountered any technical sections.
That one hurt the neck.
Perhaps a few bumps that I wasn't ready for, however. Time for a break.
Huh?
Break time?
Yeah, those rocks knocked the out of me.
Oh, really?
Again, my thing is showing that way.
It was also time to check the map. John was doing a great job of keeping us on course. We were riding in an area called Judith Basin, which is surrounded by mountain ranges. The Little Belt, Highwood, Judith, and the Snowy Mountains. The basin name comes from the Judith River, which Meriwether Lewis named in 1805 for his cousin, Judith Hancock, first wife of William Clark. Approaching a wide open field, I noticed the campground off to my right. Turns out it's the Leave No Trace campground right next to the Russian Flats airstrip. Yes, an airstrip. What a thing to find out here in the wilderness. Situated at an elevation of 6,300 feet is the Russian Flats Public Airstrip. Working with the U.S. Forest Service, the airstrip was created in 2010 through the volunteer efforts of the Montana Pilots Association and Recreational Aviation Foundation. Curious as to what the sign at the edge of the airstrip had to say, we stopped to take in the wildflowers and snap a photo.
Well, I thought I could smell the cow poop. And there's the reason why. Communing with the bovines.
It should be noted, if you're riding in this area, there are plenty of free-range cattle, so keep an eye peeled. I certainly didn't mind the cows or the smells. There were many workaday commutes where I'd purposely take the long way round, just to be in the farmlands and not even have half this much beautiful nature. Within a few miles, we were back in the forest. Changing landscapes made this ride very enjoyable. Dan had stopped to relay a rather strange problem.
So I was riding along, and all of a sudden, this terrible rubbing noise. And I stopped, and I looked to see if I had a stick stuck somewhere, checked my tire pressure. Got going again, couldn't find anything, and now it's not doing it.
You lose anything?
I don't think so. There's no straps that were down there.
Wow.
I'll stop and take a better look, but I didn't want you guys to have to wait too long.
Okay.
And so it was. Chalk it up to one of those great mysteries of life, I guess. So we carried on through the hills and valleys. On our way to Sapphire Village, we took a small side detour to visit a historic site, the Judith Basin Ranger Station. This structure was built in 1905 on the former location of an 1876 sawmill. Thomas Guy Myers, the first ranger of the newly created Jefferson National Forest, first arrived here in 1906 and set up residency in an abandoned cabin. Through hard work and determination, Thomas completed the structure in 1908. Today, it can be rented as a vacation cabin, and we could see evidence that a family had rented it that weekend. Moving to the lower elevations, the smoke grew thicker. When I first heard the name Sapphire Village, in my head I could see maybe a few shops, modern amenities, or maybe even a lodge.
Lots of pickup beds.
Seeing the meager structures and the small size of the place, that pipe dream was completely shattered. We rolled up to the Blue Nugget and went in for some food. Leaving the Nugget, the air quality seemed to have diminished even more.
Well, the air quality has gone down significantly. We're now leaving Sapphire Village, which, oddly enough, the name doesn't really describe the place. But nonetheless, we're not taking the shortcut home. We're going to ride it out, by golly. And Leader John's got the GPS coordinates and tracks, and we're following him.
A short distance from Sapphire, we turned onto Forest Road 266, crossed the Judith River Game Range, and headed back into the mountains. For the most part, the roads weren't too technical. It was a fun ride, particularly since I didn't have to worry about leading the group. There was one climb up a 2-track with switchbacks that allowed me to test the new 1290 and my aging self. The 1290 has fairly tall gearing, so I needed to keep my momentum up. For a while, I was following Dan and trying to keep my forward progress going. In doing so, I was probably pushing him a bit. Sorry, Dan. As it turned out, I managed to overshoot one of the switchback corners. Fortunately for me, the overshoot area was wide enough for me to gather myself and my bike for the rest of the climb. Where's the video evidence of all this, you might ask? Well, when I started downloading all my footage, this section was either not captured or somehow the file was corrupted. Suffice to say, when we reached the top of the ridge, I was a bit winded. It was a bit of a workout. The remainder of the ride would be quite the mix of scenery. I thoroughly enjoyed it. couple of things I'm liable to slow my roll for: moving waters and heavy equipment.
Heavy equipment, gotta love it.
I don't suppose the owners of these machines would appreciate me doing a test drive, but the thought did cross my mind. In a few places along the route, you'll find private land, stay on road signs.
And back on the tarmac, headed for Neihart.
Today's ride was a great experience. There were no major mishaps, and the loop took me yet again to beautiful places I'd never seen. Aside from the wildfire smoke, I couldn't complain about a thing. This was all Moto Tire's busiest summer, and it was difficult to break away from our tire business. But I'm glad I took the opportunity to get some seat time on the new KTM, see new territory, and hang out with good friends. The event would last another day, but I chose to head home early. A big thanks goes out to the Montana BMW riders for allowing me to tag along. Having covered only a minute portion of the Little Belts, as they're called, there was much more to see. Maybe someday I'll return to this beautiful part of Montana.
Okay, so that was Neihart. Now it's off for Kalispell. We're going to do 89 North, DeShoto and Browning, and Whitefish. Should be a good ride.
And so it was. If you're interested in exploring this part of Montana, some excellent resources are available on Friends of the Little Belts website. You can also visit the Into the Little Belts website. There you'll find links to several maps, including those maps that depict the many OHV opportunities. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and pressing that like button. We appreciate your support.